Hello, my name is Clemmentine Stephens. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, but I'm originally from the Caribbean, Antigua, and I came here via London. I'm a teacher assistant. I teach with the Virginia Beach City Public School. I teach physical education. Well, I came to the US via London. Oh, it was wonderful. I was very young, of course. So it was very carefree. As a little girl growing up, I had no cares in the world. And it was just wonderful when I can remember everything was just playful and happy on the island. I think we really brought with us to London was the family togetherness. Mother always have us, all the family, sitting down and eating on a Sunday. And even when we went to London, she continued to do that. And that was one of the things that I really liked was sitting down and eating together. I think I would probably, as I was the one that really loved always by my mother's side sewing. My mother she was well known on the island and she just had her own seamstress business going. She made wedding dresses. And so for everyone on the island, everyone know my mother, even President of Antigua called her mom because she made her first pair of pants. And I always would sit and sew with my mom, and I learned to sew very young. So I think if I didn't go to England, I probably would have continued her business sewing. All the time I was in London, I always wanted to come and visit and live in the US. And then I came to the US. Because when I came solely, I wanted to be a dancer. And I studied dancing, and I came to the US with the expectation of staying in New York and going visit Alvin Ailey School, the Harlem Dance Theater School, and trying to continue with my dancing and performing career, even though I think it was a little late at that time because I was in my late 20s. But I ended up meeting my husband and married. So it wasn't what I was expecting to do, even though I'm glad I end up doing that. I think, first of all, they should do some research on the country, make sure they know where they're going and the culture of that country. I also think it's important that they should make sure they have a job lined up or something if they're going at an age where they're able to work. And also make sure you know someone there, a family member or a friend, because it's really hard going to a country when you know no one. As I said, my parents took me to London as a very little girl. It was a big culture shock. And the first thing I missed was the open field. As a little girl, as soon as I get home, take off my uniform, I would be running in the open fields playing with my cousins. They were all boys. And then we would go to the beach. We would just walk to the beach and have a relaxing swim. It was like so carefree. It was so beautiful, and then just go home and eat and do our homework. And that was what I missed most. As a little girl growing up on the island, most of your toys and things that I had were things that you would have to help you as a grown as a woman. And one of my favorite toys was my coal pot and a cooking pot. It was made out of red clay. I think, back then in the island, because this was end of the 50s, early 60s we're talking about. So we used to cook on a coal pot shaped like a pot and come down like a little stove. And you would put the coal at the bottom and put the pot on top. So they were both matching in red clay. And my parents had bought me that. That was my toy. And I would cook alongside my mother when she was cooking. And I was upset because I couldn't take it with me when I was going to London. And I had to leave that behind. Because my father was already living in London and his brother was there. They both went. And my cousins were already there a couple of years ahead of us. So they helped me transition. They taught me things as a little girl. They were little, especially with schools, and that, which was really hard, the hardest transition, being the only Black child in your elementary school. And it was, they helped me with that transition. They told me things and what the names, what they meant when kids were calling you names. So they helped me a lot with that transition, believe it or not. The yearly carnival, Juve, where you're dressed up and dancing with the drums, the music, the steel pan, which is a very important thing in the Caribbean. They played the steel pan and drum and dancing in the street, and everybody's loving and hugging everyone. And I think one also the things that Antigua, I think people should know and would love. Antigua have 365 beaches. You have a beach for every day of the year. Antigua is so small, but it's all water. It's around, and there are beaches that some of them are small, of course, but there's a beach everywhere. The whole island is just water, and it's beautiful. And I think that's why the tourism in the country is so much because of the beaches, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful little island. No, but now apart from my mother, but she's deceased. But the one person I think everyone should know about is my uncle. He's amazing. He's my mother's youngest brother. He's 96 years old. All his life he was a fisherman, and I always remember because every time he would go fishing and he would bring back, and they would go in these little sailboats and go to Trinidad and all other little islands and come back. And he's a strong man. He walks everywhere. At 96, 3 years ago, he went to the hospital and they told him that he had cancer, and they just closed him back up and tell him to go home. And he's still walking around. He's amazing at 96.